Governor Kathy Hochul in a moment. And here with me to start this conversation, Chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke, and Chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, Congressman Adriano Espaillat. Congressman Espaillat, we were just talking about the president threatening to withhold funds from the $16 billion Gateway project unless it bears his name. A federal judge has said the funds must be released. But I wanted to get your thoughts on the situation.
Well, first and foremost, the Gateway project is a national security project. I mean, the Northeast rail line from Virginia to Boston is so frail that at any time, if it's stopped, if the service there is stopped, it puts the entire region in jeopardy. So this is a major national security issue. And at the same time, as an economic development project, it's going to create thousands of jobs. So this decision to hold back the funding, this childish decision to hold back the funding, will impact the lives of thousands of families. And folks working there, the trade unions, are really upset. Some of those folks voted for him and now are regretting it, of course.
Congresswoman Clarke, the White House kicked off Black History Month with President Trump sharing a video depicting former President Barack Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama as apes in the jungle. The racist image has been taken down by the Trump administration, but Trump refuses to apologize, instead pushing all blame into a nameless staffer. What's your reaction to this?
Yeah, you know, it's just bold-faced racism, you know, and I think that the American people see it for what it is, you know, the gaslighting that's coming from the White House podium, the lack of remorse on the part of the president. You know, I don't know why anyone is surprised. I am not. It's very clear that from day one, going back to the birtherism that launched Donald Trump's political campaign, we know what it is. You know, it's not a dog whistle. It's an overt, racist, bigoted administration led by Donald Trump.
Now, staying with you, Congresswoman Clarke, has there been any contact between the White House and the Congressional Black Caucus on this racist post? And could there be any good faith exchange, in your opinion?
Not to my knowledge, and not to my knowledge. Donald Trump has not demonstrated in any way, shape, or form an interest in the well-being of Black Americans in the United States of America. So I don't expect that he's going to change now. As a matter of fact, I expect him, given sort of his mentality, to dig in deeper. And it's sad that this is Black History Month, and we know that at the end of the day, history, the recorder of history is still rolling. And if, in fact, they think that they're going to achieve the erasure of Black history, all they're doing is solidifying their white supremacist ideology as part of what will be a resistance that will ultimately be victorious in America by doing what they're doing.
Journalists have been combing through millions of redacted Epstein files released by the Justice Department. By starting tomorrow, some members of Congress will get their first look at the unredacted version of the files. Congressman Espaillat, what have you made of the revelations in the latest release?
Well, I think that first, the American people want us to see everything. They don't want bits and pieces of the files. We ought to have access to the full file. We ought to see who was involved in any criminal action, criminal activity. I think there needs to be that needs to be looked at. And whether they're Democrats or Republicans, let the chips fall where they may. I think that's what the American people want, and that's what the victims demand, as they should.
Congresswoman, Madam Chairman, the victims seem to be overlooked by a lot in this process. As a leading woman in the Congress, chair of the caucus, Black Caucus, how do you view this and how they've sort of slow-walked this whole process? And now the Clintons are saying, since they've been subpoenaed, do it in public, which some are saying could backfire on the Republicans.
Well, the victims are the North Star in all of this. And one of the things that I'm really proud of is the way that the women, the Democratic women in Congress, have stood shoulder to shoulder with these women. We're not going to drop this by any means. These victims and now survivors, thrivers, deserve to have the full truth revealed to the American people. Their ultimate goal is not only their own vindication in all of this, but that this should never, ever happen again in America, where the most powerful people are cavorting, at minimum, with a human trafficker and pedophile. It's unbelievable.
I want to ask this. Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman has said that he absolutely expects for the government to shut down. DHS funding negotiations are supposed to continue this week. But I want to ask both of you, Congresswoman Clarke and Congressman Espaillat, have they begun yet? What are you hearing about this as ICE continues to expand its deportation efforts in Ohio, where reports suggest they plan on targeting Haitian immigrants?
Well, we've heard of some of the initial proposals regarding face masks, sensitive locations, and body cameras. But what we haven't heard is the fiscal commitment that there is. Because at the end of the day, this is ultimately about the funding, the money, the $75 billion that ICE got, $45 billion of which will go towards creating new detention beds, and the rest will go for new personnel. They have so much money in their hands that they're rapidly recruiting people without the proper training, without the proper background check, or determining whether or not many of them had the mental fitness for the job. So this is dangerous stuff, and the money is fueling this. I think we should rescind the money, dismantle it, because obviously ICE is now working, is hurting and terrorizing America. And then let's see what could we come up with that makes sense and that has a human face. But the money has not been spoken about. We've heard about, I support unmasking them and having sensitive locations. That's my bill. And body cameras is also one of my bills that should be taken up. But beyond that, the funding aspect of it must be addressed.
Madam Chairman?
Absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly with Adriano. And there were a number of things that were put on the table to be addressed. And my understanding that those conversations continue to happen. They're very clear, colleagues on the other side of the aisle, the Speaker of the House, that members of the Democratic Conference, members of the Congressional Black Caucus, members of the CHC will not vote for a clean resolution to this. They have to come in and negotiate the humanity elements of what immigration custom enforcement is all about. And I agree with Adriano. I don't see that it can operate under the auspices under which it is currently operating, with my support and with support of the members of the Congressional Black Caucus.
Congressman Espaillat, the Super Bowl hasn't even started yet, and the right is up in arms over the halftime performance by Bad Bunny. The president has claimed the artist is sowing hatred, while his supporters have argued the Spanish-speaking singer is somehow un-American, even though as a Puerto Rican born U.S. citizen, he is American through and through. I mean, what are your thoughts about all this?
Bad Bunny is just driving them crazy, you know. And in a city, San Francisco, listen to the name, Reverend, San Francisco, right? That's not Portuguese. That's not French. That is Spanish. So we're going to be looking forward to that show, and I hope he brings in Cardi B and just make everybody jump up and down.
All right. Well, thank you both, Chairman of the Hispanic Caucus and Chair of the Black Caucus, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke and Adriano Espaillat. Thank you both for being with us. Joining me now.